Well, welcome back. And as promised, SABC will all of this week through SABC News channels be running specials on the TwoPot system. And this is obviously just to bring clarity, to answer some of your questions. And I must say, it's been an eye-opener for me, just listening to and getting people to actually respond to your questions. It suddenly dawned on me that we don't know as much as we thought we knew about this whole situation. But from Sunday, retirement fund members will be able to access a part of their retirement savings without having to resign from their jobs. However, the South African Revenue Service has warned anyone who intends to withdraw from the savings part of the imminent TwoPot retirement system that the taxman will take his dues. And in our special focus on the TwoPot retirement system in partnership with Sanlam, let's look at the tax implications this morning. Now, we are joined by the head of technical support at Glacier by Sanlam, Annalise De Meillon-Muller. She's joining us virtually. And in studio with me, we have Treasury's acting tax and financial sector policy Deputy Director General Chris Axelson, and also Deputy Commissioner of SARS, Johnstone Makhubu. To all of you, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to a Morning Live. So, exciting times, maybe not so exciting. Depends on who you speak to, depends on, who is likely to take this particular benefit or not. But we are here to try and answer some questions. And Annalise, thanks so much for joining us there virtually. Let me start with you. In terms of exactly what's going to happen, perhaps a few steps back, how will members be able to access their funds first and foremost? Because I think we take for granted that people know how to actually get the process going. So perhaps let's start at that point.
Good morning. Thank you for the question. I think the first thing we need to consider is it depends on your retirement fund and the administrator. So each fund has their own process. In general, I do believe that everyone will have a type of withdrawal form that you as the member or the client needs to get access to and complete then with the necessary details for us to apply for the tax directive on your behalf. So generally, wherever you go to transact on your retirement fund, whichever portal, if it's online or if you send in a form, or I think a lot of people speak to their financial intermediaries, that's your first step to understand how you will gain access.
And then, of course, what we've heard a lot of this morning, because our focus is on the tax implications, Mr. Makhubu, people are asking, why are they being taxed so heavily? So let's just start at the taxation rate, exactly how people will be taxed and why are they being taxed so heavily, according to what our viewers are saying.
Thank you. I think important to note is that when people make contributions to their pension funds, those contributions are not, or rather deductions, are not taxed. At the taxing event arises when you withdraw at retirement or when you resign. So the fact that those deductions are not taxed when they are made means that the government and the system is trying to encourage people to continue to save, knowing that the taxing event is deferred to a future date. So the contributions are not taxed when they're made, and therefore it makes a taxing event when there is a withdrawal. Therefore, I think it's important that viewers understand that a withdrawal triggers a taxing event. And that's why in this instance, because there's withdrawals, we are now applying the rights to tax those withdrawals. How it works on the rate that a person falls within in line with the income that they earn, and starting off at 18% and moving through to 45%. If you are earning above 1.5 million. So it is progressive in nature, and starting off at 18 million, at 18%, and if you are below the threshold of tax, which is around 95,000, then there is a tax-free implication in as far as the deductions are concerned.
Again, I think that's an important point to clarify, the fact that people should understand that they will be taxed at the rate at which they are taxed right now. Whatever bracket you fall into, that will be the taxation leveled against your withdrawal.
Certainly. And I think it's important that that understanding comes through, because I hear the heavy taxation, but it is not different to the rate that is normally applied to your earning income.
So, Mr. Axelson, to that point, again, Mr. Makhubu is clear that this will be the first time that you are taxed on these funds. But people are laboring under the impression that they've already been taxed. So perhaps a point of clarity there, because I've heard this over and over, especially over this past week. Why are we being taxed again? So perhaps we can clarify that.
Yes, I think there are a few points to make. I mean, I saw some of those tweets earlier that would say, oh, it's very large tax implications. But it's no different to the current system where we already tax you if you take withdrawals from your retirement pot before you resign. I mean, before you retire. So if you were to resign and you took the cash out, you would be taxed. There's a special tax table which applies, and if you took out more than 25,000, you would be taxed 18% on it. This is the same situation in that there will still be tax when you make a withdrawal, but it's different. It's not based on that special tax table, it's based on your marginal rate. But the point of this is to say that this is for people who are in distress. If you take a withdrawal out of a savings pot and your income has been drastically reduced because you need that income out of the savings pot, your tax rate will be lower. So as Johnstone was saying, even the first 95,000 will be tax-free. So if you lost your job, you've got no other income, and then you decide to take some money out of the savings pot and there's no other income, you won't be paying any tax on that amount. But if you've got a lot of income, you're doing very well, and then you take the money out of the savings pot, you will be taxed at that higher rate, which could be up to 45%. But then should you be taking money out of that savings pot, if you've got a lot of income at the time? So this is why we've changed it to try and influence people's behavior to only really draw it in times of need.
So, Mr. Meillon-Muller, what happens in the event that someone decides to trigger the process? You decide, okay, you want to withdraw this money, and then suddenly now all of this information is at your disposal and you decide to change your mind. What would be the implications, if any, of changing your mind mid-process?
That depends on how far we are into the process, because once we have applied for a tax directive on your behalf, the administrator, and SARS then sends us the amount that we need to withhold on your behalf, we cannot reverse the transaction or the process. Then your only outcome is really to receive the post or the net of tax amount and recontribute it into your savings. But again, as some of the other speakers just confirmed, you do get a tax deduction for contributions. But this does speak to the fact that you need to be very, very, very sure before you take a withdrawal, because at some point in the process, there's unfortunately, just no going back at that point. And I also do, just to what Mr. Axelson said, I'd like to just add to that the savings pot that you are being taxed on in this instance, you would have been taxed on in any event when you arrived at the point of retirement on the retirement table, which is the cumulative 550,000 over your lifetime taxed at a 0%.
So then, Mr. Makhubu, of course, as SARS, you standing there waiting, and people also, I think, some have written to me for the first time, realizing that if they owe SARS, they may not get all of the money that they intend to withdraw. So talk to us about the implications of that and the fact that people have to make sure that at least they don't owe SARS, because you will be taking your chunk.
Sure. I think one of the principles that must be borne in mind is that a tax system must be equitable. So taxpayers must be treated the same. In this instance, our position is that if you owe SARS money and you don't have an arrangement currently with SARS, so there is no deferral of payment, there is no arrangement in place, that debt is not currently disputed, SARS has got all the rights to instruct the fund administrators to deduct the money that is owed to SARS. So our position is that over and above the directive informing the fund administrators what tax should be deducted from the withdrawal, we will speak to an additional amount of the debt that is due that the particular taxpayer must account for in terms of paying what is due to SARS. We do the same if somebody owes SARS and they are going on retirement or they are resigning. If there is a liability due to the state, we do inform fund administrators and we exercise the right to quench that debt that would be due to the fiscus. I think generally South Africans would expect that we treat this particular incident or this event of TwoPot in the same way that we would treat all other withdrawals in terms of offsetting the debt that is there. However, I think those that have already made arrangements with SARS, whose debt is currently being paid at the back of those arrangements, they will not see the deductions because there's an arrangement in place already for that particular debt.
Again, Mr. Axelson, very important, because it's amazing how when it comes to issues of taxation, sometimes people just, get lost. And things get lost, and people aren't always aware of where they are, what the situation is with regards to SARS, what they may be owing. And you and I may sit here and think that's ridiculous, but it's a reality. It happens. And how can people then go about making sure that they know exactly what is to happen, how much they will be taxed if they perhaps owe SARS? Is there anywhere that they can go beforehand, before they make the decision, just to get a sense of where they are, how much they're going to be taxed, etc.?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, the tax system is very complicated. We try and make it simple, but it's not easy. They do need to check with SARS to see what debts they have. SARS have a very good e-filing system, which they can check online. But if they're looking to say, well, how much tax will I have to pay on these types of withdrawals, they should try and check with their retirement fund administrator to see whether they've got a level of income that they would be providing to SARS. So then SARS can check and give the directive back. Or they can try and think about it themselves. See, what income have I earned last year? And look at the income tax tables and say, well, what was the marginal rate? If it was above 95,000, it's about 18%. And then the further you go up, 200,000, 300,000, it gets to 26, 27. Look at that income, look at those tables, and that will give you a roundabout view. But you're only ever going to get the final answer when you actually ask SARS themselves.
And Ms. Meillon-Muller, when it comes to that, it's not just the taxation. There's also now the administrative fees that come into play. So again, we take for granted that people would know who the fund administrators are, how they get the process rolling. Again, this week has been very instructive in showing that people are not clear about all these things. So how do they go about, once again, just getting in touch with the administrator and also finding out how much they will be charged in admin fees?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think before I reply on that, I do want to clarify that SARS has committed that the lump sum tax calculator on e-filing will be able to give the taxpayer or fund member an illustrative tax value that needs to be deducted. And that's something we want to encourage people to make use of, because you'll be getting a correct tax calculation. It won't include, according to our understanding, the debt owing, but that you can easily find on e-filing under your statement of account. You can go and double check what you do owe SARS if you are unaware, and then just take that into consideration when you use the SARS provided calculator. Then back to your question particularly, it is a question of how will they know, and the administration fees. You need to have a look at that withdrawal form that I responded or that I mentioned before. Not each administrator or retirement fund is going to charge the same administration fee. So make sure that you this time read your terms and conditions extremely carefully. And if you have a financial intermediary or a tax practitioner, please do speak to them if you are unsure. In general, the costs range something from R0 to about 500, give or take. That's definitely the case in the Sanlam group. The important thing about this is that fee or cost or administration fee, whatever you want to call it, you will not pay tax on. So that amount is deducted before the administrator applies for the tax directive.
And of course, we saw in an earlier package that one of our colleagues did in Limpopo, Mr. Axelson, where the person they were speaking to was actually encouraging people not to withdraw from the TwoPot system, even though it is available. Let's speak to that. Because I'm sure people are sitting there, and there's a lot going on at the moment. Some are saying, well, we wanted access to more money, and not just this 30,000 that's capped at the moment, because if I want to send my child to university, 30,000 is not going to get me very far if I wanted to deal with that issue. If I wanted to settle a substantial debt, 30,000 minus whatever taxation and admin costs, not going to get me there. So what would be your advice to people here?
Well, I think we've got to look back on what the whole point of this reform is, and it was two objectives. You know, the current system as it is before Sunday means that you can get your full access to your retirement fund when you resign. So people were incentivized to resign to then get that money for education or for loans or for other things. But then it puts them in very, very bad retirement outcomes. They've got nothing left for retirement. So part of the system was to say, we'll give you some access without having to resign. But the other part was really trying to get people to preserve this money for retirement. This is retirement savings. If you spend the money now and you have nothing left in retirement, it'll have very bad outcomes for you. So we were trying to get that balance between the two. There is also this idea that the cap is 30,000. There is 30,000 that comes in immediately into the account, but from then on, it's 1/3 of your contributions. And that can grow to be much higher than 30,000. If you kept that 1/3, don't access, after 3-4 years, that 1/3 amount could be up to 100,000, 150,000. And then you can withdraw the full amount if you've gone, I would say, for some financial advice, if it's for some very important expenditure, which education might be. So there is more flexibility within the system, and we're trying to get rid of the bad components of the current system, where you're forced to resign to gain access, and you don't preserve as much as you should.
And I think that's so important, because if you have a child maybe just going into high school now, maybe you can look long term at, if you haven't made any other provision, how this could perhaps become some avenue for you to access that money for further education if it is needed. But then, of course, there's also talk about your department, Mr. Makhubu, the taxman, who's going to be the big winner here. Everybody is saying this is just about SARS, because it doesn't matter what happens, SARS wins here. Because you are standing there waiting for your share of whatever people are withdrawing. So talk to us about that, and perhaps give an explanation to people about why this is necessary.
Now, look, I think, as we said earlier on, the view we hold is that the tax system is equitable, is neutral. The deductions that we are doing, they are in line with the policy framework that is in place. We collect on this particular product in excess of 600 billion personal income taxes. And currently there's estimates of anything between 5 and 10 billion that will result in taxes from this transaction. You can see the scale of what we are currently collecting versus what this initiative. So it can't be that the notion is correct that this is to gain tax advantage. I think it's trying to make sure that this event is treated in the same way that other events that relate to retirement withdrawals are treated. So we are not of the view that this is solely to drive tax collections. The quantum is not too huge to drive that. Our view is that at best, taxpayers should think long and hard, as Mr. Axelson is saying, when they access these funds. In my personal view, the more delayed, the better the accumulation for really needy situations where you need to be able to utilize this amount. So I think to also stress the issue of the calculator, we are working to try by Friday to bring the calculator to the SARS website. We're doing some final touches so that somebody can be able to insert their own numbers and be able to get a sense of what the tax implications will be. But currently it's not live. it will go live latest by Friday, the 30th. Again, I think for people that want to participate in the system, we've got a number of channels, including the SARS online query system. We've got USSD *134 *7277. You can go in there to check further. One, you are registered for tax. Number two, you've got any debt that is due to SARS, or you've got any outstanding returns. These three things are the things that can make the application through fund administrators to lead to a directive that is not successful with SARS. And we do urge taxpayers to leverage the electronic channels. We're in the middle of filing season, and they may not have a superior experience if they go through to our branches at this point in time. And therefore, we do encourage them to use the digital channels to understand outstanding returns, debt, and potentially when the calculator comes out on Friday, to understand what the tax implications will be.
And speaking of Mr. Meillon-Muller, you know, people probably thinking also about tax assessments going forward. So how this is going to impact that. So maybe we can just speak to that briefly, and feel free to come in as well and add on, gentlemen.
Thank you. So I think what I do want to confirm, perhaps if I may do so, on your tax affairs being in order and you having filed your assessment for the year, we only have the current tax season closing in October. So next week, if you have not filed yet, and perhaps this is me asking a question to Mr. Makhubu, would that mean that you will give the taxpayers leeway until the end of October before that rules comes into play? Or do they need to sort out their tax affairs in the current filing system before next week, should they wish to make use of the immediate withdrawal that starts next week at some point, depending on your fund and what has been communicated to you? And then on the assessment, at the end of the year, or when you file for assessment, nothing is going to change. The amount that you requested to withdraw from your savings pot will be income for you. So it's deemed gross income, and it goes into your little calculation. And then what your administrator withheld on your behalf and paid over to SARS will be a deduction as per the normal calculation as well. So if it so happened that you had the incorrect tax deducted, it will be corrected and balanced upon assessment. It could cause you potentially to be a little bit out of pocket, or the reverse if you are lucky. It all depends on how you manage your tax affairs and your income and other deductions during the course of the tax year.
I confirm that. So we will consider this as part of the gross income, the deduction, and allow for the administrative costs to be deducted. And again, you may be in a refund position come filing season July next year. I think that's correct. We are encouraging taxpayers to regularize their tax affairs between now and when they decide to participate in the process. It makes it easier. If they don't want to participate by the 1st and they want to defer that to later in the year, in the month, then they've got a longer time period to regularize their affairs. So my view is that they don't have to rush into SARS centers to regularize, because they can decide when they want to approach their fund administrator for the actual kickstarting of the process.
You know, there's one point I'd just like to make, is that government didn't do this to raise revenue at all. This was to create a system that has more flexibility, but also will hopefully lead to more preservation of funds to let people have a better retirement. This isn't about raising revenue. At the moment, we already raised 12 billion in revenue when people resign and they take their cash in full. We're expecting only to make 5 billion this year. So it's not a revenue issue. It's about flexibility and better retirement system for everyone.
And I've seen some stories of people already, trying to cash in on their retirement funds before the system comes into effect. Has that happened to any great extent, Mr. Axelson, as far as you know?
Well, this is why a lot of people call this the three-pot system, because there's this third pot with all your current retirement contributions. And we were trying to be very careful to say, we're not going to change any of those rules. So please don't resign, because even if after Sunday, those old rules will stay in place. So even if you resign in 5 years' time, the amount that you have in that third pot, this vested pot, you can still gain access to in full. So I would plead with people not to resign in the next couple of days before the system comes in just to access, because you can still access those funds later on.
I'll give each of you a final word, but we've got Begi Dlamini saying, morning Sakina and the guest, the two-pot system will show and prove how many South Africans, working class especially, are able to manage their monies. South Africa is open for business and government needs to cover debt. Talk about the tax in general. It is a complex one. So we're out of time, but let me give you at least 10, 15 seconds each just for a final word, advice, if you will.
Thank you. Then let me go. Yes, we reiterate, please do not make use of the withdrawal unnecessarily. You are literally cheating yourself out of your future income, because do not forget the power of compounded interest. Every little bit you take out now will result in your capital growing less and you having less money for an income in those years after you have worked so hard. So please consider that and consult a tax specialist and an investment specialist on your choices.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks. No, I would just say, don't rush. There's lots of time. You don't need to make any rash decisions. We think this is a very sensible system, but we will continue to look at it. And we hope that people make the right decisions and that the system actually works for everyone.
Makhubu?
We encourage taxpayers to regularize their tax affairs if they intend to participate. In fact, generally, to ensure that their tax affairs are in order. In this specific instance, if they want to participate in the two-pot system, it's very important for them to do so. We also channel them to our digital platforms if they want to know about any of the outstanding matters from a tax perspective.
Well, thanks so much to our panel. Always good when people say, okay, they are answered on the question. So thank you so much for your insights this morning. Johnstone Makhubu is Deputy Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, SARS. Chris Axelson, Treasury's Acting Tax and Financial Sector Policy Deputy Director General, and Annalise De Meillon-Muller, who is the Head of Technical Support at Glacier by Sanlam, speaking to us about the tax implications for the two-pot system. And of course, if you missed it this morning, you'll still have opportunity all this week. But of course, very, very insightful regarding the tax matter this morning. With that, it's 8 o'clock.